Welcome to Lunch with Tech Leaders, where we have engaging conversations about software development and cloud engineering with industry leaders and subject matter experts. These episodes are created by the Great Lakes Tech Leaders, an online community of technology practitioners. Please come join the conversation by visiting gltl.rbn.ai. Again, that's gltl.rbn.ai. Now strap in, because we're deploying to production in 3, 2, 1.
All right, welcome to the latest episode of Lunch with Tech Leaders. My name is Ray Welker. I'm a cloud solutions architect with Right Brain Networks, and I'll be your host today. Joining me, as always, is our co-host, Tom Kowalski. Say hi, Tom.
Hello, everybody.
All right, and today we have a former guest, Tommy Francis. Definitely excited to continue talking with him here today. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Yeah, long time, Tommy. It's been a little bit since we talked, and today we'll continue talking on the topic of infrastructure as code.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me back. I'm looking forward to it.
So I know we've kind of really dug into kind of a lot of the nitty gritty of infrastructure as code. The basics, a little bit more of the intermediate and the advanced topics of it. Don't really want to get into that full technical side of it today, but focus more on the training, kind of the maybe your experience with how you were onboarded onto adopting infrastructure as code practices, and maybe look what you can speak towards in terms of culture, how you're able to maybe influence say like a DevOps culture in your organization or other cultures you've seen just by working with others.
Yeah, certainly. So I guess because my career started as a developer support at Microsoft, and then I went into the infrastructure side of things. So in my mind, I always had the idea of we should try and automate things if possible. So it's the same things sysadmins would often do is creating scripts. So through the years, as an admin, a systems admin, I would create scripts, but they were always just lots of random scripts here and there. There was nothing really structured, right? Then early in the 2010s, I guess somewhere in the 2010s, I started discovering some tools to help with that stuff, like Puppet and Ansible and Chef. So I actually got quite into Chef early on, which was a good eye-opener to realize there are more structured ways of scripting things than just writing random scripts. Unfortunately, it was hard to get buy-in from the organization I was at to allow a tool such as Chef to actually do anything with power. There was a big, anything having root access was frowned upon. So I ended up I developed these Chef scripts that could completely configure our web hosting environment, which had lots of virtual hosts in Apache. That was a pretty complicated setup. So I had some Chef recipes that would bash out all of that. Unfortunately, I couldn't use that in the end because of the root problem. So I tried to find ways to get these automations more visible by the organization so they could see the value of it.
When you were first introduced or just started to introduce these, were you on a cloud platform at the time, or was it more on-prem servers, virtual servers at least, or what did it look like?
So this was still very much an on-prem environment. This was a legacy enterprise IT environment. So we had lots of Unix servers. I think we were running IaC, which didn't shudder. We started getting some Linux servers for a new web farm that we built. So that was a bit more, I was a bit of a Linux geek as well. So that was more comfortable to script in Linux than it was in Unix. And HPX was a previous place, but then IaC. Nothing that works on Linux just works on IaC, so it can be tricky. So yeah, that was all on an on-prem environment, but we still didn't have any cloud infrastructure at that time. Later on, we actually acquired a company that was already using the cloud, and that's how I really got into the cloud. But this journey started before then, if you like. One thing that I still didn't have a way to really show how these automations were useful. And then one team, just by chance, they wanted us to create a Jira installation for them. So I started playing around with that. I started learning what Jira did. And through symbiosis, I guess, I started learning about the other products. So we've got, case in point here is going to be Bamboo, where Bamboo was used to script a lot of the deployments. So we had a WebLogic server farm, and all of our deployments were log into the server, SCP the file across, and just a whole lot of manual stuff. Takes a long time, error prone, awful. So I started creating some deployments in Bamboo that would just, it was still me writing my scripts, but now they were being controlled by Bamboo. Because they were new projects, we had a bit more authority to allow them to do their thing. And that started showing the company the efficiency of spending the upfront time to write these automations. That kind of grew, that kind of exploded even. Then it got to the point where pretty much all of our deployments were using Bamboo. And it was around that time that we acquired the cloud company. And that's when I started my cloud journey, and I really discovered the next level of infrastructure as code. Because all I was doing before was really scripted deployments. So I wasn't using infrastructure as code at that point. I tried to a little bit with Chef and Ansible. That got blocked. So I'd gone back to the just regular old scripts, but using Bamboo and Jira to show the power of automation. And that was what triggered the organization to see the value in spending effort to automate these things. Yeah.
I was just going to say that's just really interesting because, I mean, doing that approach on-prem as its own beast, it's kind of a completely different mindset and kind of tool set from if you're, doing any of this in any form of like cloud infrastructure. I've heard of similar, like you can use Terraform for like Hyper-V and provisioning things like that, and more of a virtualized environment that you host on your own infrastructure. But I think it's really creative what you demonstrate. And I feel like a lot of people who are sysadmins, myself included at the time, it's like you realize the power of automation, and you kind of just want to continue to refine that and improve that process. It adds a lot to the business, and like you demonstrating that case, I think is really interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of why I was asking why was this on-prem or cloud, and you're saying, oh, we don't have root access. Because my journey, when I was introduced, we were already in the cloud, or we just started going to the cloud, and that's when it was kind of all at once, right? So ephemeral servers, immutable servers, infrastructure as code. We did it all at once. So that it was kind of a different journey, right? I didn't have to worry about root access because we had root access to make the images, and then that was it, right? We had immutable servers. So yeah, everyone has a different journey.
I would dream of being able to work in that kind of environment where I could just be like, we can build things now. In enterprise IT, it's kind of like, try to do your job. Well, you can do your job, but you can't automate your job because your hands are tied to you having to log in with long-lived credentials and all sorts of bad things like that. That was before we went into the cloud. So if we want to talk about like the person aspect of it and training, I did want to say that as soon as we acquired that company with, which was already in the cloud, I jumped straight onto that, and I was super involved and passionately interested, and I paid for my own A Cloud Guru subscription, which is how my training started. So that was really what happened. So up to that point, everything was just self-learned and so on and so forth. So you learn how to use Chef and you use it, you work it out as you go along. But then I thought, if I'm going to be working with the cloud, I should learn a little bit about the cloud. Now, I had used AWS before. Back then, I thought it was just spin up an EC2 instance, and yay, I've got a server. When I did that first A Cloud Guru course, it blew my mind. Honestly, as an ex-developer who then did infrastructure, who likes to put the two together, and then discovering the power of all of the utilities we have in the cloud, the API and all of the cloud formation and Terraform that we'll talk about, it was like, it's party time. I was so excited to get to work on this stuff. And to be honest, that excitement hasn't really stopped. It's moved around since then, but I love this stuff.
I think you have a really nice approach to that. Like, I always think of it as like, you got to crawl before you walk. Like, it's understanding, you can use the tools, but you kind of need to understand the cloud or the environment you're working with in order to start kind of piecing the two together and leveling up how you're using those tools. So like the way that like I learned as well was, doing a little bit of click ops, let's go build a VPC, let's go, get a CIDR range allocated and divvy up my subnets and, click on things in the console in order to, start making things, making sense logically of like how these components fit together. And then, then at that point, it's like, well, let's simplify this. Let's write the infrastructure as code. Let's look at the documentation. Let's start writing out templates that I can deploy to various, I can repeat my code. I can repeat my deployments using the same code that is. Yeah, I think you got really, really nice answer to that, Tommy.
Yeah, I kind of had the same journey as a developer. I was kind of thrown into the infrastructure side of things. We were running on-prem, servers in the closet, moved to a co-location, but it was still, there was still a lot of work that I was doing. And it was just like, looking at AWS, it was like, okay, this is what I want. As soon as Microsoft SQL Server came out in RDS, I did not want to manage clusters anymore, SQL Server clusters. So that was our journey to AWS. And each new thing, it gets me more and more excited.
So Ray, you touched on the term ClickOps, and I don't know if you want to go into the culture side of things yet, but I feel like that's a good segue into something I wanted to talk about. So did we want to talk any more about that journey part right now? Do you want to go into more about how I got into like CloudFormation, or do we just that was I started my cloud journey and all that stuff comes with it, right?
Right, it does. I don't have too much else to say on the ClickOps aspect of it, or like the training aspect of it. I mean, like a couple things. You mentioned a really good one, A Cloud Guru. I definitely think that is a great way to get up to speed with cloud, DevOps, maybe any specific tooling as well. There's definitely always a course out there. Udemy was one I used for a while as well, and I know previously I've used like Wiz Labs for certification and testing and just kind of getting merits. Always recommend official documentation for learning anything for CloudFormation, CDK, Terraform, so on and so forth, and try to just kind of experiment as well as just some information. Like that's a recommendation I would have. Build things, tear them down. You can obviously stay within the free tier of a lot of services. So that's kind of how I learned. And
I think that's one of the best ways of learning. You can study and do test exams all you like, but until you start doing stuff and running into problems, it's when you have to solve a problem to do a thing. That's when it really sticks, right? Especially if you have to, and that's why I really enjoy getting my hands dirty on this stuff still. So as my career's developed, I've moved towards more of a solutions architect, and that can be tricky because that officially is more of a non-coding type role, depending on who you talk to. But I definitely don't want to stop being technical, right? So it's hard trying to find that balance. But I wanted to, you mentioned the term ClickOps, and that's an interesting thing because that's part of the big cultural problem I have found is, let's say we've gone to the cloud, and let's say early in our journey of going to the cloud, we were working directly with AWS, and one of the first things they tell you is codify everything. Even if the recommendation is, even if you're playing around, like trying something new, just do it with code. But you don't, right? You don't. You go into the console because it's easy. You go into the console, you click create an RDS cluster, you do this, you do that, and it's easy because doing the code it feels like it's a lot harder. Just touching on that a little bit more, that feels to be the case, that it's easier to go into click in the console. But quite often, I'll be in the situation where I want to change something, or I don't want to leave it up because it's costing. So I want to tear it down, and then next time I have to create it again manually. And that actually ends up being not easier than just doing the code in the beginning. But to those who aren't familiar with code, it's definitely easier doing it in the console. But that's part of the culture problem, is that there's still a mentality of, I just want to quickly do this thing. And as an infrastructure solutions architect, you're constantly fighting that battle. So even now, I'll be automating things currently with Helm charts, where all of the configuration for something is being fed into your Helm values file, and it spits out a running application on the other end in Kubernetes. but they're still like, oh, can we just go in and change that configuration without having to go back through the code? It's like, well, that kind of breaks the whole thing. And it can be hard to articulate that to someone who hasn't gone through that journey themselves. And that's one of the biggest challenges I have. And I've got a case study on that almost. If you wanted to comment first, then I can go into that.
One moment, Bill M had just a comment in the chat. Yeah. I just wanted to touch on that. It sounds like it's in regards to the training aspect that we were mentioning, kind of onboarding, but he's stating that as an organization, they have small stories queued up for new developers to work on. So that way they have something real to actually work on, but they're able to learn and get their feet wet. I think that's a great idea. We do something similar with learning the concepts of AWS and deploying the small applications. Like doing something tangible and real is a great way to, start learning what you need to do in a real working environment.
I would just, attest to what you were saying. That's one of the hardest things that I've come across too, is that cultural aspect. If it hasn't hurt enough, right, you don't get it. When I deal with people new, especially with serverless, they're always complaining, I don't have the control, right, or there's cold starts and things like that. And it's like, well, you haven't managed servers, right, in a highly available distributed, right, clusters. You'll appreciate not having to do any of that to deal with like little, gotchas here and there. But it's one of the hardest things, unless you went through it, right, and had to deal with all of that.
So just a quick question. So for the small stories that Bill asked about for onboarding new developers, and Ray, you said you do the similar thing. We're talking like real product here, like just small chunks of real product, or like just example exercises, because I find if it's example exercises, I think there's a tendency not to really put your mind into it. But if it's real work, and even if it's just small chunks, then you have to put your mind into it. And I see, Bill, that you clarified, yes, real work. So thanks. That's I like that.
Yeah, I think that's more meaningful than like, say, an example application or like an example service you're wanting to deploy out, because there's not the same, I guess, weight to it. If you're doing something kind of in the sandbox versus, actually working to implement, a new feature or something like that. But yeah, you're back to your point on culture. Definitely want to keep on that topic. You have a case study. I know that there's a lot of other organizations who've gone through a similar process and just reshaping their DevOps culture in the organization. I'm very curious to hear the one that you have. So yeah, if we could expand on that.
Case study might be a bit of a strong word. I couldn't find a suitable expression without leaving a big pause. But it's one of my colleagues that I used to work with. He came from the Unix team. So that was part of the problem with the root access, was the servers were theirs, right? They controlled the servers, and no one else could do anything on them. So if we came up with ideas for scripting, then it was no, but I digress. So he came from that background, Unix sysadmin, and he started, he was one of the people that was brought into the cloud team. So I after we acquired that company, I really pushed for cloud and creating a team for the cloud, and we got a cloud team created. And he was one of the earlier members of that cloud team. And I do remember very early on that he would comment about a lot of the stuff I had done, a lot of these complicated automations, and I think we were using Packer to build CloudFormation templates. And to him, I remember him saying it seemed like a lot of overkill just to get something small done. And I'm like, well, it is what it is, right? We're automating this. This is the work it takes. So fast forward, not even a year, he's been getting more involved with the cloud stuff. He's really started doing some of the CloudFormation and scripting himself. He's had the headaches of going into the console, or someone else going into the console and doing something and changing something and it turning into a mess. After that period of time, around a year, he completely changed his tune, and he's like, I completely understand why we do it like this. He recognized that he used to think it was dumb, but now it makes sense. And it really highlighted to me that although some people might be able to just look at why we do something this way, they might just get it. For a lot of people, they're going to have to go through that journey. And he's my case study of that being the case. Like he really excelled, and I think he's like one of the lead members of the cloud team there now. So he's really taken to this new culture, but he had to go through it. He hated it in the beginning. He went through it. Now he loves it. And that was my example. I think it's a good example of how living that journey can show some of the value in it.
Yeah, I think from like the tech side, we have a different perspective than like say maybe an organization's buy-in to why they might want to like shift the focus of let's have like comprehensive DevOps strategies. So like from our perspective, yes, it makes our jobs easier. We can deploy things faster, more precisely. We can, have our code version. We can have our infrastructure as code versioned. We can revert back to a prior commit if needed, and we can try and be pretty agile and deploy things quickly and in repeatable manners. Like that helps us, and like I think like organizations have a lot of drive as well to shift the DevOps culture because they have like KPIs they're trying to either meet and or establish. Like, well, we want to reduce our deployments, the time that it takes to deploy to say production, or time it takes to get out new features. And like you kind of have to like as an entire organization buy into that mentality. It's like it's bigger than just your dev team or your ops team like adopting this principle. It's like you have to work with your product release team as well in order to help them with their KPIs and drive what are the underlying sales goals that they're maybe trying to say to a new client on how often we release new features, so on and so forth, like that. Like there's a lot of different components of an organization that need to buy into that philosophy, I feel like. But yeah, that's a really interesting case in that organization, and it definitely seems like he's drinking the Kool-Aid now. It's good stuff. There's another case study I just wanted to share. This is something I dug out when I was looking into this the other day, which is from 2017, so it is a little bit older, but it's around that mentality of an organization buying into a comprehensive DevOps strategy, and that was with that British multinational banking and financial service, which is Barclays. They spent 18 months just overall re-engineering their team and implementing and adopting a new DevOps strategy. I mean, they had an overall goal to reduce deployments to production in that case, or deployment to a single system. They were previously deploying, it would take 56 days in order to do that. And then they essentially got that down to a 4-week time frame. So quite a bit by, reducing the amount of time it took and just adopting the new philosophy. That's like they had over 1,000 people they had to train. And, the fact that you're a financial service giant like that, that's such a large undertaking. It seems like for something that like an entire country is dependent upon. It's kind of crazy to reinvent that.
I've seen companies. Well, I've had experience with going through these kind of reinventing themselves, and we're going to we're going to implement a DevOps or cloud strategy. The experiences I've had of that have been, I think, suboptimal, because a lot of the time there seems to be, and I understand this from the business side, there's an impetus to get some project released on this new platform before the platform is necessarily ready, because we can't invest money in this new direction without showing it working with an application. Now, if you've got, especially in the finance sector, if you've got to have a lot of guardrails and processes in place before you should really be deploying any applications in that environment. That can take a lot of work without showing anything. It sounds like Barclays, I don't know the details of how they went through this migration, but it feels like they probably spent the appropriate time up front to get it ready before they started deploying applications in using this new way.
Yeah.
I think to do that, you need the right leadership that really understands the value of getting all the building blocks done properly in the beginning, rather than, I think a lot of the time leadership, they think, yes, we'll use the cloud, we'll use DevOps, but we need to do that bit quickly so that we can get this application out in like a month. And then you're like, okay, well, we can't get our service control policies, our landing zone, we can't do all of the things correctly in time to get that application released. So we release that application, and then we start getting down the age-old problem of technical debt, and you never get time to actually get the platform up to that mature level. So I think the leadership, having a deep understanding of how these environments should look at the base level, I think that's very important. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. You do need the leadership, and then the leadership needs to identify key individuals to help implement this and train up. I'm just thinking about it in the way of like, how are they going to train 10,000 people? It's like you need kind of champions. You need champions that buy into this idea and are able to push their weight around in order to make this new deployment process possible.
I'm holding back here, but I think it's. When you say train 10,000 people, there's an issue of boundaries, right? And ownership and responsibilities within that organization. There shouldn't be any change that you're doing should be small enough that you can make with a single team and then slowly come up, right? So I don't know. I would be intrigued. I'd like to read it, but every time I've seen like a top down, hey, we're doing this, right? It's just bad. It takes a lot longer. If they're forcing an implementation, that's where it's bad. It needs to be, this is the direction, right? And then empowering those teams, giving them the resources, the direction of what you want, that good communication structures within them, and how that's implemented. But yeah, it's just whenever I see that we're, top down, we need to implement Terraform, and everything. It's like, that's not going to help anybody. And they're like, oh, well, synergy and, it's the same tool. People can go across teams. Never works out. It should be on that team to, here is what your responsibilities are. Here's the contract, right, of working with other teams. Go ahead and implement whatever you need to do to get there, within the constraints, right, of the company security, everything else. But yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think like more so, yeah, same. I agree with you there. I think there does need to be some form of tangible direction from, say, like from a leadership team. Like, yes, we need to, it has to be metrics based in my mind and data driven. Like, okay, we need to understand where we're at and where we are looking to go. So maybe it's a company becoming like a SaaS company and how they offer their product. So maybe they're trying to move to that more than like, a service based approach. So it's like you have to give your team members the resources and the flexibility to move towards that model. So yeah, it's not like, hey, here's, you're using Terraform nowadays, or, we're going to rewrite our entire application and gut all our Java developers and we're going to write it in Python now. like maybe not that. That's probably not the best approach. But like a drive or a direction to point your team in to maybe to have a better overall DevOps culture in the organization, but it provides business values in a way.
Yeah, enabling the culture, right? Not saying we need pipelines to be faster, right? Like it's not it.
No, that's not it. That can maybe be a Jira card after if you find a slow one or something like that.
Yeah,
there's too many sleep statements in it.
Certainly in I think maybe in some of the larger organizations where you have a lot of technical silos, that you'll have like the DB administrators, the Unix administrators, the middleware guys or whatever. I think that can be challenging for the organization as well, because if you're enabling the developers to build their applications, depending on the level of cloud services that they're going to use, you need to give them the power to do those things. But sometimes it can be like, well, no, you can't create a database, you're a developer. So you can't create a a CloudFormation script that builds your stack. You have to get the database team to build a CloudFormation script that builds the database. And we want to, it can be hard to get rid of the siloing sometimes in the organization.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's through fear of loss of responsibility or what, but it can be a problem as well.
That is the problem. No, I completely agree. That is the problem right there. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having, a team that is developers or, infrastructure database, but it needs to be clearly defined, right? Those teams, I like to say, need to operate as separate companies. There needs to be a clear contract with what their responsibilities are, SLAs with the other teams, documentation, right? How do you interact with that team? How do you get those resources, right? So it's very clear. And that's what the leadership needs to focus on, making sure that there is that clarity, between the teams, and it's very, how they communicate, what their responsibilities are, making that very transparent throughout the organization, and, enabling them is where they need to focus on, instead of, you need to start using Terraform, everybody, or everyone needs to go to AWS by this date. Which it can be set, right? You can do that. Hey, we have, certain obligations here, or requirements, or, we're getting a big savings or whatever, if we migrate all of our workloads. But it needs to, you need to empower the teams to do that, right? Versus the top down, this is how you implement it to get there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That does make a lot of sense. I would like to see in Barclay's case, like with an organization that large, how they went about it. Maybe further in the case study, I can do that. But I've read the overall gist of what it was, and obviously that's coming from here's a PR piece. We've re-engineered our DevOps approach.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely good stuff.
Another good thing that I did spread around a little bit was sharing a copy of the Phoenix project. It was quite good. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that book.
Yes. Yeah, I recommend reading all of those. Phoenix Project, Unicorn, DevOps Handbook, Continuous Delivery, Accelerate, I think it's called. That's a really good one.
Well, they're now on my Kindle. So
the most mandatory reading for us is the Phoenix Project, for anybody new coming in.
Yeah.
So you were agreeing with the direction. You're saying, like, the organization has to kind of back the direction and help individuals or team members grow in that new direction, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was hard when we started, and in fact, I don't think we're there yet. But when we started the journey, we didn't have the upper management backing. It was kind of ground roots from the development department down, without leadership being on board. And we ran into roadblock after roadblock, just trying to get through, tool selection, hiring the right people, changing the type of people we were hiring, going away from the traditional sysadmin to hiring a developer who could do some of the sysadmin automation. That has continued to be a struggle for us. Just because the leadership doesn't see the overall benefit that we do, kind of on the line side of things. And we've gone from 76-day development cycle down to about 24. So we've done the right things, but still, it's an uphill battle. They're focused on other stuff.
It's interesting you say about hiring developers rather than sysadmins. So I think that's one of the big challenges. Is a lot of the time organizations are pulling from their sysadmin pool or looking for new sysadmins because they are the ones who look after infrastructure typically. I'm very lucky. I feel it was a great combination that I started my career doing developer support, because then I feel like it's combining the both. But you need developers now. So a lot of the times you get sysadmin, you go to the sysadmins and start getting them to do some coding, be it like Helm charts or Terraform modules or whatever, and they don't actually have any development practices to go on. They don't know how to use version control. They all those problems, and you still get a lot of manual processes just done in code. So like for different environments, they'll have a completely different set of code for one environment and this environment and that environment, because they haven't got that software development background to understand that they could maybe do more reusable code and parameterize it. So you've got the code, but you don't have the benefits of the code. So yeah, going to the developers, getting developers that can do infrastructure is powerful, but then that hurts the existing pool of sysadmins. So it gets very political.
Yeah, you said it earlier when you talked about scripting, right? My older generation or longer term sysadmins have scripted everything, but all those scripts are sitting on their desktop. They're not in Git, right? They're not in Artifactory, right? So even that, it's not reusable code. It's reusable for them. So trying to get everybody to think in that new mindset has, when I get kids out of college, that's great. They're ready to roll. That's the only way they've been taught. But then they don't know how to do sysadmin work because that's not taught in school. So they come out, I got a good Python programmer, or I got somebody who knows Chef or Ansible, but they don't necessarily know what they're doing in the back end. So, for me, it's teaming up a 15-year sysadmin with a 6-month out of college programmer, having them work together.
It's interesting because that's another, as you said, that's another side of the challenge, is that if you haven't had those years of sysadmin, you don't know all of the, you don't know all those gotchas, and you're not going to be able to like sysadmin your way around a problem and to know where to dig in to find a problem, right? So that pairing the sysadmin and the developer, I like the sound of that.
Yeah, that does make sense. I feel like a lot of sysadmins who know how to code and know how to script, it's like they eventually move to kind of a DevOps or cloud engineering position, and then they like reshift their career in a way. I still find there's a lot of value in a lot of sysadmins. It's actually kind of a thread I was reading this morning a little bit and got me thinking. It's like I feel like, and maybe this is just me, like the mentality of sysadmins has kind of shift to more of that ClickOps style, but really, like, you can find some really great sysadmins out there, and I feel like if they were either themselves learning up on versioning, source control, great security practices, cloud architecture, and so on and so forth, they can be some of the strongest individuals when it comes to like shaping a DevOps within an organization. But yeah, your approach there with pairing them up with people fresh out of college, I think that's a great way to kind of bridge the two skill gaps there.
And they're going to learn off each other as well,
yeah.
Right? So the sysadmin is going to start picking up development best practices, and the developer is going to start learning how tricky it can be to find problems sometimes.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see when you have somebody who's been doing this. They take a Linux sysadmin for the last 15 years, and all of a sudden, this kid comes out of college and is able in 15 minutes to program what we used to take him 10 hours to do a week, and all of a sudden it's done. And he's like, "Wow, what have I been missing all this?"
Yeah,
it's a lot of fun to see that happen. Now I'm way past coding, so I'm not like you guys. I haven't touched the keyboard from that perspective in a long time, but my team has. So,
well, it sounds like you have a lot of great insights, and we really appreciate you, joining us on stage and asking some questions, Bill. It's been great.
No,
same with you, Tom. Like Tom and Tommy, definitely I feel like we covered a lot here. Got some experience around your experience around training, kind of onboarding process, as well as how you can shift culture within an organization just through DevOps. Yeah, next week we'll be hearing from Jason Brown, as well as Preston Frazier and Tom Kowalski around the topic of cost optimization strategies. Again, thank you for joining us, and we hope to hear you be